I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
The silence inside Windsor did not break with shouting. It broke with a single legal sentence that changed the future of the royal household. Prince William stood motionless as the court's ruling was placed before him, and Queen Camilla's name sat at the center of it, like a crown no one expected to see. In one stunning moment, private power shifted, old promises trembled, and Windsor itself became the battlefield. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. William did not reach for the page at first. He stared at it as if the paper had arrived carrying a verdict against memory itself. The prince had expected conditions, limits, perhaps a quiet compromise hidden behind legal language. Instead, he found the sentence no one in his circle had prepared him for. The court had ruled that Camilla inherited the Windsor private estate fully. The Windsor private estate meant the family's private land, residences, treasured holdings, and legacy assets connected to Windsor outside the public crown structure. And now the Queen Consort held complete control over it. The room tightened around William. He lowered the document slowly, not because he could not understand it, but because he understood it too well. This was not a minor transfer. This was not temporary authority. The court seal on the final page made it absolute, immediate, and legally enforceable. Windsor had always meant more than walls and rooms to the future king. It carried the memory of the late queen, the promises whispered after her death, and the unseen power behind who protects the family's past before leading its future. Camilla heard the confirmation in another room, and she did not smile. She gripped the armrest of her chair as if the ruling had pushed victory into her hands before her heart was ready to hold it. The Queen Consort had spent years fighting the shadow of being seen as an outsider, but this moment did not feel like acceptance. It felt dangerous. She had won everything the court could give her, yet she could already feel what the judgment would cost. William looked toward the senior aide standing near the door, and the question came out cold. Who allowed this to reach court without warning me? The aide had expected anger about money, access, control, perhaps even titles. Instead, he heard betrayal. The prince was not thinking like a claimant. He was thinking like a son, an heir, and a grandson watching a piece of family history move beyond his reach. The ruling was only the beginning. Around the estate stood people with old wounds, private loyalties, and ambitions they had buried for years. And before William could confront the decision, he had to face the lives that had brought Windsor to this breaking point. No court ruling lands inside a royal family as ink on paper. It lands as grief. It lands as suspicion. It lands as betrayal spoken without being named. For William, the decision struck at legacy. For Camilla, it threatened to make her victory look like conquest. For Charles, it exposed a choice he had delayed too long. And inside Windsor, every name suddenly carried a wound. William saw Windsor as more than a private holding. To the prince, it was part of the future monarchy he would one day protect. A living piece of family history tied to the late queen, his children, and the quiet promises made after her passing. The future monarchy meant the next stage of royal leadership, where the heir must guard not only the crown, but also the memory and trust that hold the family together. That was why the ruling cut so deeply. It did not just move control, it moved meaning. Camilla saw the same ruling through a different pain. The Queen Consort believed the court had finally recognized her place beside the king, after years of being treated as someone who had entered the story too late. She did not see Windsor as a prize grabbed from William. She saw it as proof that the royal household could no longer keep her standing in the doorway of acceptance. Yet, even in that validation, Camilla understood the danger. A victory that wounded the heir could never feel clean. Charles sat between them emotionally, and that position became its own punishment. The king could not comfort William without making Camilla feel accused. He could not defend Camilla without making the prince feel abandoned. Every path demanded that he hurt someone. Every silence made the hurt worse. The monarch had delayed a hard choice for too long, and now the court had made it for him with cold finality. Catherine noticed the change before anyone else said it aloud. She watched William during a quiet conversation and saw his shock harden into something more painful. The prince was no longer only stunned by Camilla's control. He was disappointed in his father. Catherine understood that look. It was the look of a son realizing the king had allowed distance to grow where trust should have stood. Then the private estate advisor delivered the line that deepened everything. In a documented account prepared for the family, the advisor revealed that several members had assumed William would hold oversight authority once the case was settled. Oversight authority meant the right to supervise major decisions without owning the estate outright, and that expected safeguard had vanished. Camilla's position had strengthened because of one buried clause in an older estate arrangement. That clause, once ignored, now became the most dangerous sentence in the palace. And the ruling did not appear from nowhere. It was born months earlier, inside Windsor, when one conversation turned private tension into legal war. Every royal crisis has a moment everyone later pretends was ordinary. This one happened after a private memorial dinner at Windsor, when the candles had burned low and the family had already begun to leave. A conversation meant to last 2 minutes became the trigger for everything that followed. By midnight, one promise was questioned, one signature was requested, and one future king walked away feeling betrayed. Camilla had waited until the room softened, until voices lowered, and the weight of remembrance made everyone careful. The Windsor Memorial Dinner for the late Queen's private household staff was meant to honor the people who had served her closest routines, the quiet figures who understood her habits, her loyalties, and the rooms she valued most. The Queen Consort chose that night because Windsor felt heavy with memory, and because she believed Charles would understand what security meant to her after years of being measured against the past. William had entered that evening believing the estate's future was settled in spirit. The prince thought Windsor would remain under shared family oversight, meaning major private decisions would be watched by more than one senior royal, so no single person could control everything alone. To him, that mattered, because the estate was tied to his grandmother, his children, and the next chapter of the crown. It was not simply where history had lived. It was where the future would learn what history demanded. Camilla asked Charles to confirm her full lifetime authority over the Windsor private estate, and the request landed harder than she expected. The Windsor private estate meant the family's private homes, land, treasured rooms, and legacy holdings connected to Windsor outside the public crown structure. The Queen Consort did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Her words carried years of being accepted in public, while still feeling questioned in private. William objected calmly, and that calm made the room colder. He told Charles that Windsor belonged to the continuity of the crown, not to the comfort of one household. The prince did not accuse Camilla, but she felt accused anyway. She heard in his restraint the same old doubt she had spent decades trying to survive. Even after becoming queen, she felt as if William still saw her as temporary, as someone allowed near the throne but not trusted with its memories. Charles did not reject her request. That was the moment everything changed. The king looked from Camilla to William and asked for every legal option. One aide later described that phrase with unease in a documented private account prepared after the ruling, because it turned a family disagreement into a legal path. Charles may have wanted time. He may have wanted peace. But peace built on delay was already becoming danger. Days later, a forgotten estate memorandum was pulled from archive storage. The estate memorandum meant an old written record explaining how private property rights could pass inside the royal household, and it became the foundation of Camilla's winning argument. William did not know that dinner had become the starting point until much later, and when he finally discovered it, the prince no longer wanted explanations from aides. He wanted Camilla in front of him, with no lawyers, no courtiers, and no polite royal language left to hide behind. The confrontation did not happen in a courtroom. It happened in a closed Windsor sitting room, where the air felt too heavy for ceremony and too personal for protocol. William entered with measured calm, but the shock had sharpened into resolve. Camilla was already waiting, composed but pale. Between them stood not only a ruling, but years of silence, suspicion, and family history demanding to be spoken aloud. William had requested the meeting himself, and that choice mattered. The prince refused to let aides soften his words or turn pain into palace language. Aides are senior staff who manage royal schedules, messages, and private arrangements, but this time he wanted no one managing the truth. Camilla understood that the moment he entered, the queen consort knew this was not a polite discussion about paperwork. It was the first time the future king had come to speak to her as the person who now held Windsor in full. Charles stayed away at first, and his absence made the room more dangerous. The king's authority usually acts like a shield inside royal conflict, because his presence can stop one person from pushing too far. Without him there, William and Camilla had no buffer, no careful pause, no father standing between heir and wife. The prince looked at her across the silence, and the queen consort held his gaze, but both of them knew the ruling had already changed how they stood before each other. William spoke first. He told Camilla the ruling might be legal, but legality did not erase what Windsor meant to the line of succession. The line of succession means the order of people who will inherit the throne. And for the prince, Windsor was tied to that future through his children, his grandmother's memory, and the trust placed in him as heir. He was not asking for sympathy. He was asking whether she understood the damage. Camilla answered with controlled pain. She said she had spent decades being told, in silence and in whispers, that she would never truly belong. Now the law had finally recognized her place. Yet even that recognition was being treated like theft. The queen consort did not raise her voice, but her hurt carried force. She wanted William to see that she had not chased Windsor as a trophy. She had reached for it because she feared being erased again. William then placed one page from the estate memorandum on the table. The estate memorandum was an old written record explaining how private royal property could pass within the household, and this page had removed every remaining family safeguard. He asked Camilla whether she knew what it would do. She paused. That pause became more powerful than denial. Camilla's silence told William enough. The prince understood that she had known more than anyone admitted, and the queen consort understood that he would never forget it. Then the door opened. Charles entered, saw the page between them, and the fight shifted. It was no longer stepmother and heir. It was father and son, and the king could no longer hide behind delay. Charles had spent a lifetime preparing to carry the crown, but no training had prepared him for the look on his son's face. The ruling exposed more than Camilla's inheritance. It exposed the king's hesitation, his private loyalties, and the quiet machinery that had moved while the family believed nothing was final. Now every signature had a shadow, and every silence sounded like consent. William did not wait for comfort. The prince looked at Charles and asked the question that had been building since the ruling first entered Windsor. Why had his father allowed a private family matter to become a public legal victory for Camilla? The crown meant the monarchy's public authority, duty, and inherited role. But this was not only about the crown. This was about family trust. William believed the king had the power to clarify the estate structure before court became the final judge. Charles knew he had delayed. That delay now stood between them like another person in the room. Charles removed his glasses and set them beside the file. The gesture was small, but it carried defeat. The king admitted he had wanted peace so badly that he allowed others to define the battlefield. He knew any clear decision would wound someone. If he limited Camilla, she would feel unprotected again. If he supported her completely, William would feel pushed aside. So Charles waited, hoping time would soften the conflict. Instead, time sharpened it. Camilla listened as the words landed, and the victory in her hands suddenly felt heavier. The queen consort had believed the ruling would end the argument. Now she understood it had exposed the king's hesitation. Charles had not protected her with certainty. He had allowed the matter to move until the court gave her what he had been unable to say directly. That realization shook Camilla, because triumph built on delay did not feel like loyalty. It felt like being left alone at the last moment. William turned to the estate advisor's role, and the room grew colder. Estate advisors are private legal and property specialists who guide royal family decisions about homes, land, archives, and inheritance. They had treated the rediscovered memorandum as decisive, arguing that Windsor followed personal legal language instead of succession expectations. Succession expectations meant the family's belief that the heir should have natural oversight over places tied to the monarchy's future. The prince heard that argument as a warning. Private wording had defeated family understanding. Then came the revelation no one could soften. A trusted advisor revealed in a documented internal account that a final clarification letter had been drafted but never sent. The letter could have explained Charles's intention before the court reached its ruling. It could have protected William's oversight. It could have reassured Camilla without handing her everything, but it remained unsigned, unseen, and useless. Charles looked at the file, and William saw the truth before his father said another word. The king had not chosen in time, so the court had chosen for him. Camilla had won, but she looked wounded. William had lost control, but he looked steadier than before. And once the family understood the ruling could not be quietly undone, the first consequences began moving through Windsor with brutal speed. The morning after the ruling, Windsor felt changed before anyone said a word. Doors opened carefully. Calls were answered in lowered voices. Aides moved files as though the paper itself had become dangerous. William returned to the estate wing and saw the first sign of the new order: access lists being revised. That was when shock became consequence, and consequence became humiliation. William stopped when he saw the schedule on the desk. The prince did not need anyone to explain what had happened. His name had been moved from advisory access to notification-only status, meaning he would be told about certain estate decisions but no longer help guide them. The estate office had begun implementing the ruling immediately, and every update now reflected Camilla's full control over the Windsor private estate. That mattered because the ruling was no longer a legal sentence trapped inside a file. It was now changing who could enter, who could decide, and who could protect what Windsor held. Camilla's office became the final channel by morning. Staff members who once reported through shared family routes were told that private estate decisions would now flow through the queen consort. Shared family routes meant the quiet system where senior royals were kept informed before major decisions became final. That system had protected balance for years, but now it had been replaced by a single line of authority. Camilla had control, yet the speed of obedience made her uneasy. Victory was moving faster than comfort. William watched an aide remove his advisory access from one estate schedule, and the gesture struck harder than any public insult. The aide did it carefully, almost apologetically, but the prince saw the truth inside the small movement. His connection to Windsor had been reduced with a pen stroke. He did not shout. He did not demand the page back. He simply looked at the empty space where his role had been and felt the loss settle in. Catherine found him standing alone after the change, and she understood before he explained. She saw that William's hurt was not about losing control for the sake of pride. It was about feeling excluded from his grandmother's legacy. The late Queen's legacy meant the memories, traditions, private letters, rooms, and values she left behind for the family to protect. Catherine knew the prince had always believed those things belonged to the next generation as much as to the present household. Then the private inventory review deepened the wound. A private inventory review is a careful list of rooms, objects, archives, and heirlooms connected to an estate. The review revealed that symbolic rooms, heirloom collections, and family archives now fell under Camilla's full authority. The queen consort had not only inherited control over property, she had inherited the power to decide who could touch memory. William focused on one sealed storage room tied to the late queen's private correspondence. Private correspondence meant personal letters and written exchanges never meant for public life, and he believed no single person should control that door. Catherine listened, then urged him not to fight from anger. Her words slowed him. Before the prince could decide whether to resist, he needed one private conversation with the only person who could remind him what kind of king he was preparing to become. The turning point came without witnesses. No aides, no lawyers, no palace language polished for survival. Just William and Catherine, behind a closed door, with the ruling between them and the future pressing against both of their shoulders. He had entered the room ready to fight for Windsor. He left understanding that the monarchy could not be saved by winning every private war. William met Catherine after the access changes, and the prince carried the weight of every revised list into that room. He wanted clarity before deciding whether to challenge the ruling through internal palace pressure. Internal palace pressure meant private royal influence used behind closed doors to push decisions without taking the fight into public view. William knew he could force meetings, demand reviews, and make Windsor uncomfortable for everyone. But he also knew that every move against Camilla would pull Charles deeper into the wound. Catherine listened before she answered, because she understood what anger was hiding. The princess saw that the estate dispute had become bigger than property. It had become a test of emotional discipline for the future king. Emotional discipline meant the ability to hold pain without letting that pain control the next decision. Catherine knew William would one day inherit a monarchy that needed steadiness more than revenge. She also knew his heart was not breaking over access alone. It was breaking over memory. William finally said what he had not said to the aides, to Camilla, or even to Charles. He felt as if his grandmother's memory had been legally handed away. The confession stripped the anger from his voice and left only sadness. The prince had believed certain parts of Windsor would always remain protected by shared family duty. Now the ruling made that belief look childish, and he hated how much it hurt. Catherine took his hand and gave him the sentence that changed the course of the day. She told William that legacy was not only what a person inherited, but what a person refused to destroy in the fight to keep it. The princess was not asking him to accept humiliation. She was asking him to choose the kind of strength that would still matter years later, when the noise faded and only the consequences remained. William made his decision slowly. He would not launch an immediate counterattack. The prince would instead demand formal protections for family archives, heirlooms, and access for the next generation. Formal protections meant written safeguards that could preserve certain rooms, letters, and objects from being controlled by emotion or personal conflict. That choice did not erase the ruling, but it changed the fight from revenge to responsibility. Catherine then suggested one final direct meeting with Camilla. Not surrender, not apology, a boundary. The queen consort needed to hear what Windsor still had to represent beyond ownership. William understood. He could lose authority without losing dignity, but he could not let silence become permission. That private choice changed the palace response. Yet outside the gates, the world had already turned one family wound into a national spectacle, and Britain was about to judge the crown before the crown could explain itself. By sunrise, the private ruling was no longer private in spirit. It had escaped the palace walls and entered the national bloodstream. The country did not read it as a legal technicality. It read it as a question of loyalty, memory, and power. Outside Windsor Castle, people gathered beneath grey morning skies, holding phones, newspapers, and opinions sharp enough to cut through royal silence. William said nothing in public, and that silence became louder than any statement. The prince understood that one wrong sentence could turn family pain into open war. Palace aides prepared a controlled statement, emphasizing legality, continuity, and respect for private estate procedures. Private estate procedures meant the internal rules used to handle royal family property that is not directly controlled by the public crown. The words were careful, but the country did not want careful. The country wanted to know why Windsor now felt divided. Camilla watched the coverage alone, and every headline seemed to turn her victory into accusation. The Queen Consort flinched when one commentator called her inheritance the most controversial private victory of the modern reign. Modern reign meant the current period of royal rule under Charles, and that phrase mattered because it placed this dispute beside every other crisis he had faced as king. Camilla had won the estate in law, but the public was judging her in emotion. That was a different court, and no document could protect her there. Charles received the first draft of the palace statement and read it twice. The king knew the words were safe, but safe did not mean healing. He could defend legality. He could praise continuity. He could speak of respect for private arrangements. Yet none of that would answer the wound people now saw between his wife and his son. Charles had tried to avoid choosing openly, and now the nation was choosing sides for him. Then one image defined the morning. A newspaper front page showed Windsor Castle beneath the headline, "Camilla gets it all, William left stunned," with a smaller line asking, "What did Charles know?" The question cut deeper than the headline. It pulled the king into the center of the storm and made his delay look like design. William saw the page, set it down, and refused to give the reaction everyone wanted. Broadcasters framed the story as a rare collision between the Queen Consort's rights and the Prince of Wales's future authority. The Prince of Wales is the title traditionally held by the heir to the throne, and in this crisis, it made William's silence feel heavier. Was he heartbroken? Was he angry? Was he showing dignity? Or had he been defeated? Every viewer seemed to choose the answer that matched their loyalty. Outside Windsor Castle, a small crowd gathered near the gates, and one older woman told a broadcaster, "This feels less like inheritance and more like the family losing its balance." That sentence traveled fast because it said what the palace statement could not. The issue was not only who controlled rooms, letters, and land. The issue was whether the royal family still knew how to protect trust. Public pressure rose by the hour, and Camilla understood that silence would not save her. William understood it too. The monarchy could not leave the country with only a headline and no emotional answer. So the prince and the queen consort entered one last room, not to reverse the ruling, but to decide what kind of family would remain after it. The final verdict was not written by the court. The court had already spoken. The true verdict was written in the way William chose restraint, the way Camilla accepted victory without triumph, and the way Charles finally understood that silence can wound as deeply as betrayal. Windsor had changed hands in law, but the monarchy learned something harsher. Inheritance can protect property and still bruise a family. William met Camilla one final time after the public reaction, and the prince entered knowing the ruling would not be reversed. The court ruling meant the legal decision that settled who held authority, and in this case, it had placed the Windsor private estate fully under the Queen Consort's control. The Windsor private estate meant the private royal homes, rooms, archives, land, and legacy holdings connected to Windsor outside the public crown. That mattered, because this was not only property. It carried memory, family duty, and the quiet question of who should protect what the late queen left behind. Camilla did not stand like someone celebrating. She looked shaken, as if victory had taken more from her than defeat might have. The queen consort agreed to preserve protected access for selected family archives, heirloom rooms, and private memorial spaces connected to the late Queen and future generations. Protected access meant written permission that would allow certain family members to enter, review, and preserve important private spaces, even though ownership authority now rested with her. It did not undo the ruling, but it softened the wound. William did not congratulate Camilla. He did not attack her either. The prince chose words carefully because he understood that anger would give the public another fracture to watch. He told the queen consort that Windsor must never become a symbol of family conquest. The line landed heavily. Camilla had fought for recognition, but William was asking her to prove that recognition did not mean erasing everyone else. Camilla admitted, in a recorded private family conversation prepared for the household archive, that winning the estate did not feel like peace. The queen consort said the ruling had cost her trust she had spent years trying to earn. Her words changed the room. For the first time, William heard not triumph, but fear. And for the first time, Camilla saw that his resistance had come from grief, not hatred. Charles then signed a private family understanding. The king knew it could not overturn the court, but it could soften the damage. A private family understanding meant a written agreement inside the royal household, used to guide behavior, access, and responsibilities without changing the legal ruling. It created protected zones of memory inside the estate, places where the past would not be treated as anyone's prize. Charles set down the pen and left slowly. He had preserved the ruling, but he had lost the illusion that everyone had accepted it. Camilla won Windsor in law. William preserved dignity through restraint. The king paid the price for hesitation. And the monarchy survived, not untouched, but changed into something more cautious, more wounded, and more aware that private decisions can shake a public crown. There is no unresolved mystery left at Windsor, only the lasting lesson that a royal family can inherit palaces, but must still fight to protect trust. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.